yeah, I still deal with depression. Yeah, he hasn't taken it away, but he's been present.
Hi, I'm Danielle, and welcome back to Making Space. Not just a podcast, but a place for honest, open conversations about where people have been and who they're becoming. So if you've listened to the podcast long enough, you know I'm a huge advocate for therapy. And that's partially because, along with my faith, therapy has had such a positive impact on my mental health. One of the themes of this podcast that I love is sharing in the middle. In that vein, today's episode digs into my friend Mfon's ongoing battle with mental illness and her resolve to overcome. Mfon and I met in college, and till today, she is still one of the most bubbly and energetic people I have ever met. Every time I'm around her, I leave feeling lighter because of her joyful spirit. However, as I've gotten to know her, she shared more about her struggles with depression. I had the privilege of walking alongside her through some of the challenges she faced last year, and despite all these obstacles, somehow she still remained consistent about checking in with me and how I was doing, which is such a testament to her generous and caring nature. For some of us, maintaining our mental health is a daily battle. For others, it's an occasional stressor. Wherever you're at, I hope this episode meets you where you are, and that you leave encouraged by Mfon's vulnerability and wisdom. Quick content warning that we touch on some difficult topics, including self-hatred and suicidal ideation, so please keep that in mind as you choose to listen. So, what is something that you have learned or that you're currently learning that you wish your younger self could have known?
I actually thought about this one, but definitely, obviously, mental health, aka mind, depression, you're always going to I'm still learning to this day. But one thing I definitely feel like I wish I'd known when I was a kid, that like mental health is like, it's real. I feel like as a kid, you might hear mental health here and there. And kind of the family I grew up in, it wasn't really talked about. And if it was later on, it was really more so like, oh, but that's like a them thing, not here. Like we don't deal with that kind of stuff. And like, if I had known that like, as a kid, I'm dealing with mental health issues, because I can identify moments throughout my childhood that I struggled with mental health and specifically depression, especially like 5th grade. That was for me like one of my lowest years of my life, because one, I was having like a lot of personal attacks. And so like at school, I wasn't bullied in a sense of like, oh, you're ugly, like you're this and that, the third. But it was more so of like people were like making me feel less than in my character. If I was just trying to like make a joke and just be my happy, bubbly self, they would kind of give you a look. And it's just like, oh, okay, like I'm the problem. And they would look at each other and say one little thing and laugh like, oh, that was the funniest thing in the world. And I internalized that. I began to internalize all those little moments of like people telling me to be quiet. And I've heard all my life as a kid that I talk too much. And like, that's just who I am. I'm a talkative person. But because I'm hearing that at home, and then now people at school are saying, oh, you're not funny, you talk too much. And I began to internalize that more and more and more, and began to really like close the door on who I am. I began to just put bricks and just chain it up. And I was like, you know what? It's me. I'm the problem. That's fine. I'm going to stop being myself. I'm going to stop being like, outgoing. I'm going to just kind of get back into my shell and like not, be present. That's fine. But like, I didn't know that's affecting my mental health. That's a huge thing. And alongside of just like school, at home, at that time of my life, there was just a lot of conflict in my family, especially between me and my siblings. We just did not have a good relationship at the time. And at that time, I didn't know the Lord. So it was literally right as I was about to enter 6th grade. That's when I gave my life to Christ. And so everything changed after that. Amen. Hallelujah. Shout out to Jehovah. But, around that time, I can remember I had this journal that my parents gave me, or diary, they called it. It was like a little diary with a little lock. And I used to like write certain things about like life and stuff. And if I read that thing, it's so depressing in there. Like,
Oh, no.
like it's honestly like there's so many things that I just was venting in that little diary of mine. But like, I didn't realize I'm venting and I'm having all these like just mental things I'm struggling with. And I'm like dealing with depression and not knowing at all this is depression. And so I really wish that my younger self knew what she was dealing with and actually got to identify with it, because I felt like that would have really set me up in my future and not me having to discover this kind of later in life, and like not think that like I can't deal with it, you know, it's someone else's issues. Like it's just more of like this thought process that like, oh, you know, I hear about all these mental health issues, but it couldn't be me.
Yeah.
I'm not the one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a good point, especially because I don't know exactly when mental health became more of like a national conversation, but it definitely wasn't when we were in grade school, like growing up. Like maybe it started a little bit in high school, really in college, I think. It became more like commonplace to talk about mental health, identify it as an issue and like address it.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense that you never thought it was like an actual thing you were dealing with. You were kind of just like, oh, it's me. I need to change. I'm the problem. And like, especially with your cultural and like faith background, people feeling like, oh, you know, that's not a real thing. That's not an issue that we have to face. Like,
right.
Just pray about it and like, you know, you'll be okay. Like, what are you talking about? So that's a really good point. So like for you, when did you first realize that the mental health issues you were struggling with was like more than you could deal with on your own?
Definitely in college. I felt like throughout high school, I was kind of like, okay, something's going on here, like under the surface. I'm kind of just like I have all these expectations I put on myself and I never meet them, obviously. So I'm like disappointed in myself. And it's just a perpetual cycle of like feeling I'm a failure, feeling like I'm never measure up. But like I never like understood what that was. And like even I had moments of just like, because I'm internalizing all these things and like having this like self-hatred, I would like lash out on my family at random moments without realizing. But I never understood it. And then I got to college. And college is a great time for you to learn about yourself, obviously.
Yeah.
And I feel like it wasn't until junior year, actually. So it was like 3 years into college. So I feel like for me, like my depression has always just been an undercurrent. I thought it was more like situational, but now that I reflect on my life and reflect on everything, it's definitely been an undercurrent. And there's moments where it's like manageable, and there's obviously moments where it's like really bad. And this was obviously 2020, so everyone was out here going through it, you know?
Yeah.
And I didn't even understand what was going on. I just remember that one day I just kind of woke up and I felt like distant from my own self. And over the course of the weeks would go by and days would go by, and I'm just kind of like, I wake up and we struggle to even get up from bed. I was struggling with praying. I was like not knowing like what's going on with me. I kept questioning myself. I was like, why do I feel so like disinterested in like things that I always was interested in? I could barely even like get to homework and like make the dates that like all the things were due. I was just kind of like very much procrastinating on everything. And like the most I wanted to do was really lie in bed. And like, I just could not understand why. And it took until like, I mean, at this time, obviously I had the Lord with me, and I would just be like asking him, like, what is going on? Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, why do I feel this way? Is this depression? I would ask that, but I'm like, there's no way this is depression. Like, this is not how depression works, is it? Like, you know, it wasn't until I like began to watch. So shout out to Michael Todd in Transformation Church. He was on fire. Like he still is on fire, but like there is just a sermon series that he started called Forgiveness University. And there was a specific sermon that he talked about forgiving you. And I was watching all of them in order. But like when that sermon came out, I literally skipped over it. Something about it just made me like, no, thank you. I'll come back to it.
Interesting.
And so it wasn't until I sat there and I watched that sermon and I was taking notes. I forced myself to take notes, but like, it felt like for the first time ever, I was so uncomfortable, like listening and hearing him talk about forgiving yourself and having grace for yourself. And you know him, he loves demonstrations. So he's like, everyone bring out your phone, open up your camera, turn it around, look at yourself and say, I forgive. And I was like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, ew. And I did it. In fact, I don't even know how I did that. I'm proud of myself that I even tried.
Yeah.
But I was looking at myself and I can remember my mind was like, ew, disgusted. Just like, I can't even look at me. And I realized what really stemmed this depressive episode was because of the way I treat myself. And it wasn't until I had to face that and the Lord was showing me these things that I realized, like, this was depression. This is depression. That's what it means. Like, this is what it's like. And so that's when I began to like, okay, so I think I have depression, but maybe is it just like a situational thing? Like, and that's what kind of got me into the conversation, into the thought process of like, all right, this depression is real. And it was a whole month of like, this took a whole month. And then finally, by the end of, it was in October of 2020, I believe, that I was like, okay, this is real. And this is something that I need to pray about more and like really like give to the Lord. But I feel like I began to kind of connect some dots because of that moment in junior year and then to like other moments that I may have had freshman year, sophomore year, and just be like, okay, so this is more than I realized. And that's definitely when I first was like, okay, this is serious. And this is something I can't just like sit and try to fix on my own or like ignore.
Yeah, try to manage. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And like, I definitely want to touch on what you've been mentioning about, situational depression versus if this is just like something that you are clinically struggling with. And I think it's natural for us to go through difficult things in life and that to make us depressed, like based on something you're going through, then you're no longer interested or like excited about things in other areas of your life that you usually are because you're dealing with this hard thing. Like it can definitely manifest in that way. And that deserves attention as well. Just as like people realizing, hey, actually, like I just deal with this when it doesn't necessarily seem like there's any reason why I should be depressed. But because of some way that I'm wired, I am really struggling to like manage my emotions and like to find motivation to like do the normal things that I need to do every day. And once it's like persistent over a long period of time, then eventually you would be diagnosed with a mental illness in that sense. And so like, how have you navigated those two buckets, specifically under the realm of depression? Especially because like, I think one of them is a little bit easier to understand than another, especially like, we're both Nigerian, like given our cultural background and like given our faith background, like one of them is a little bit easier to accept because it's like, oh, it makes sense that you're struggling right now because you're going through XYZ. But if it's like you're not going through anything necessarily, or you just always feel like this, what's going on?
Right. Oh, yeah. And I think that's something I'm still also trying to understand because I feel like one thing about mental health too, like there's a very spiritual aspect, like a real spiritual aspect to it.
Yeah.
That like is something that like without God, you're not going to really understand it. And like even with God, there's some spiritual aspects that you just won't truly fully understand or like get. And so to answer like first, like the situational side, definitely I feel like situational depression is very more commonly accepted for sure. Cause I mean, if someone like has a job loss or, most times like people go through like really hard breakups, obviously that warrants a very like huge change in like mood and feelings, things like that. And that's very much like normal and that's okay. But to like enter the side where it's a constant and it's like, how, and I know a lot of people are just like, okay, like depression, like you're just sad. And it's like, how do I explain to you that like depression is not just sadness? Like there's a sadness to it, but like depression is more so a feeling that you are just not enough. It's like a feeling that like you'll never measure up, you'll never be great, and you're always a failure. So just give up. And it's hard to describe it as a feeling because like there's not one word you can just say like, yeah, like depression is this. And it's like, no, like depression is like such a multifaceted, very complex mental battle. You're in a space where you're always, not only are you like with your expectations and maybe other people's expectations, parental expectations, like us being in our 20s, there's all these expectations that we have to be in our 20s and the things that the success, quote unquote, that we're supposed to have. And it changes with season because we're not going to always be in our 20s. We're not going to always have our parents over us, overseeing all that we do. So what if we become adults and we are adults, but become like adults in the sense of like now we're parents or we're married. Yeah. And it's like, okay, now there's expectations start to come into play. And it's like this imposter syndrome that's like so deep within that you feel like, okay, like I'm trying to keep up, but I can't keep up. And it feels like a constant like reality check in a sense. Like you have this expectation you want to reach and you want this goal you want to meet, but then you find yourself never reaching it. And so because you never reach it, you always feel like, okay, well, I'm a failure. That's just it. So then because you feel like you just failed and you're not doing great, it's just like that feeling of I'll never be good. I'll never measure up. I don't have what it takes. Just remains a constant feeling that just resides within you. And so it's very hard to describe that because it's like, even so, like to talk about it too, it's like you're still trying to navigate that feeling too, because it's just like, why is that something that I always feel? Like, where does that stem from? And it could stem from a myriad of things, generational to like things that you were told as a kid, like experiences. Like there's so many different things that could be the root of it. It's hard to like really figure out exactly what all of it entails.
Yeah. And it manifests differently for everyone, right?
Yeah, for
Depression
sure.
doesn't look the same for everyone. Like it looks different. And so what you're saying is one of the ways it manifests for you is just in low self-esteem, in the sense where it's like, yeah, we could just say, well, you're not a failure. It's like, okay, but that doesn't change the way that I feel. And like, yes, it is a feeling, but it's like this persistent feeling that is kind of hard to shake. And like, it doesn't mean you don't have successes and like you don't achieve things. And I'll also say, like, as someone who knows you, I think we have this idea in our minds of what it looks like when someone has depression or what they seem like or the kind of person that they are. And you are like the complete opposite of that. Honestly, like compared to me, probably your baseline energy level is like way like I don't even know how to measure it. Like 10 decibels above me at all times, right? So it's like on the surface when I'm interacting with you, I would never know that this is something that you struggle with, right? But like it manifests in different ways outside of just your natural personality and your natural character.
Yeah. And that's the one thing about it where it's definitely kind of ties to like something spiritual, because as much as like, as you kind of mentioned, like the way that God made me, like I'm naturally just high energy and that's just who I am. But like, how come there's this undercurrent of feeling like I can never measure up or I'm just not worthy and I'm unloved and all these different things, even though I may know, and I do know good and well that I am loved and I have a myriad of great people in my life, my family, you, my friends, a bunch of people from church, things like that. But it's just like something I'm starting to see as well, like people who seem to have this like really boisterous or like bubbly personalities are always the one that like are overlooked. when it comes to depression. Because it's just like, oh, everyone thinks their life is all great and they have it all together because they just have this really bright and like great personality.
Yeah.
But it's like, how come it seems like the devil likes to attack that? The devil attacks with depression and making them feel like, yeah, like I feel this way when I talk to people, but once they leave, I honestly hate myself. Like I just don't want to be here anymore. And that's something I'm also trying to understand further too. Cause I mean, as I've said before, I didn't understand like this was something I was dealing with until I got to college. And so now that I'm an adult and I'm trying to like navigate this new life that we're trying to unfold and like go through and just like, what is adulthood? What is this life about? It feels like I'm like spiritually getting hit one after the other of just like, okay, yeah, you're here. I don't want you to succeed though. I don't want you to feel that you're going to make it. I don't want you to feel like you can do it. It's like there's something else. Like it comes from within, but it's like doesn't feel like it's really truly me, you know? And so that's why I'm like, there's like the spiritual side of it that like it's so hard to describe and explain because it is coming from me and it's coming out of me and it's like within me that's just holding me bound. But it also just feels like there's something else. It feels like I'm being attacked, or it feels like there's this dart being thrown at me all the time, constantly. And I have to just keep like navigating through this, like, okay, I'm feeling this way again. I don't know. Like I gotta just keep going.
Yeah.
And it's very tricky. It's very tricky.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And especially because as Christians, right, we believe that we live in this like physical world and we are physical beings, but everything is also spiritual, like underneath that. And so it's like, okay, you're facing this issue, which you can identify that is physical, but it's also spiritual. And so it's like, okay, you know how to address things that are spiritual. It's like, okay, by praying, by like seeking God, all of those things. But then it's like, okay, but what about the physical resources and the physical tools that are available to me here?
Yeah.
And once you came to that realization, like, okay, I'm like really struggling with my mental health in a way that I cannot deal with on my own and I need to seek out help. So how did you go about doing that, especially facing just the cultural taboos that may exist around like dealing with mental health, and then also the faith related taboos, people that think, you know, oh, if you're Christian, you can just pray it away, pray harder. You're not praying enough. That's why you're still struggling with this.
Yeah, that it makes me so sad to think about that too. It's just how people think that. Because if you're not going through it, if you don't know, you really don't know what it's like.
Yeah.
And for me, because I got on medication last year for the first time, and I never thought I would ever get into medication and do antidepressants or anything like that. I was more so like, okay, like maybe I'll do therapy in the future. It wasn't until I had a push from Dom, actually, shout out to her, senior year of college, because we were just talking about like just life and stuff. And she's like, Mfon, that sounds like a trauma response. Have you thought of therapy? And I was like, oh, nah, I'll do that when I become an adult, like officially. Like, I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But she was like, no, ma'am. No, thank you. You better enter into counseling immediately. And that was super stretching, but it was so eye-opening because I was like, oh, I really have a very toxic view of myself. I have such a degrading, demeaning way of how I view myself, how I speak to myself. And if I didn't go into counseling, I would have never discovered that. And so from there, kind of going through just like graduation and then getting into the workforce. And then, 2023. And we all know my 2023 was a very hard year, the worst year of my life, I can very much say. And I realized I went even lower than that 1 month that I had in junior year. Like I was in the worst depression episode I've ever been in. And so it was very weird because it was like, I very much wanted help, but I just didn't. I felt like I was drowning and I just feel like I couldn't really do anything for myself. But like the more I kept drowning, the more I got tired of drowning. And so I kind of came to a point where I knew I needed to get help. Yeah. And it was like, there's nothing that anyone could have said to me, or like, either like, you need to get help. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know that, obviously, like, you can't force me to do it. Like, I have to come to that conclusion myself. Or if someone was like, no, just pray about it, you'll be fine. And it's just like, okay, I'm at this point where I know it's more than just prayer. I can't just pray and it'll go away, because I've been praying. I've been talking to God. He's been here the whole time. And it's just like, so what do you mean just pray and you be fine, you know? Yeah. And I just got to that point where it was just like, I know I need help. I need to seek help. I need to find something. And the first thing I did was just look for a psychiatrist, because I was just like, I think I need medication. I don't think I can get up from this bed without extra help. And it was, for me, it was more so of like, I know what I need, and I'm not going to let someone else and the thoughts and the things of like culturally, what Christians believe and what other people have to say dissuade my decision, because I know where I'm at and I know what I'm struggling in, and I know that I need help. And so for me, I was like, okay, let's find someone that we can tell and talk about this with, so I can get some medication, because I can't do this on my own. I clearly have not been doing well on my own, and I know I need help. Even like, it wasn't even like me like having to sit here like, God, please, like, can I go to a psychiatrist and like get medication? Yeah. And God's like, you know, maybe, yeah, sure. Like, no. It was literally like, I feel like God was just sitting there like, Mfon, I want the best for you. I want you to do what you need to do. Yeah. And when I was like, I need help, I need to get medication, it wasn't like he was just like, you know, like, let's think about this again. Like, maybe we could try something. No, like, it was just like, please do whatever you need. Do whatever you need. I'm here for you, my daughter. I'm here for you. The medication, take it so we can keep going forward. Like, I want you to come out of this. And like, I think that's one thing that people don't realize. I mean, if God gave us doctors so that we can fix our physical bodies and all the ailments that we have, obviously God's allowing for people to give us medical treatments for our minds. There's a war that rages there, and the Lord knows about it. And spiritual things manifest into the physical. We should know that. You know, if you're Christian, if you're reading your Bible, you should know that those things happen. Yeah. So obviously, medications for your mental health should not be taboo. That's just bottom line. Because there are physically messed up things that are happening in the mind that you need medication to help balance. And I was like, I know what I need, and I can't sit here and take the time to like think about what other people have to say and what other people have said. Because if I do that, I'm wasting my own time, because I'm on borrowed time, my own self, sitting in this depressive state and feeling less than every single day, to the point of even suicide. Yeah. So if I sit here and try to rely on what others have to say, where is that going to take me? What am I going to gain from that? I know what I need. And so I was like, I'm going to go get help first. And I got on medication. And after getting on medication, I began to feel like I can actually like do something just by getting up. Just getting up and go to brush my teeth and take a shower at a reasonable time. And so being able to do that, and then it helped that I was able to get a job, because I was unemployed at the time as well. And so that helped me kind of set my path to like, all right, okay, I have some responsibilities now. I have a job, so I need to get up on time. I need to start, figuring out food and like starting to slowly eat more, because I wasn't eating as well. And doing that with medication, the medication was a huge part in like helping me get there. And then now that I was slowly making moves towards getting to my original self, then I was like, let's look for therapy. Let's find somebody that I can talk to regularly about my issues, and someone that can give me the tools that I can use in my issues, so I won't be falling back into old habits, old patterns.
Yeah.
And it took a while to find a therapist. Sadly, it's just America's health care system is garbage, to say the least. And so it took a minute. But shout out to BetterHelp because we love them. It's the Lord when things work exponentially fast. That's how you know it's the Lord. I got a therapist after months of looking for a therapist and like making an appointment, setting the appointment, and then them turning around being like, oh, so sorry, this therapist is actually full. And I'm like, why did you book me in the beginning?
Yeah.
Got my hopes up. And then finally, in like a day, in 2 hours, I finally got a therapist. And I was just like, I cried that day because I was like,
wow.
One, I was relieved. I was like, finally, we have a therapist. But two, I was like, okay, God, the work is starting now. Like we're starting the work of actually being honest, actually getting to the root of issues, actually pouring out things that I've been just holding in for so long. And I was like, God, if I'm doing this, you have to be the one to help me. There's no one else. Like, you have to be the one to give me the courage, the zeal to keep going. Like, I'm scared. I don't know what to expect. I don't want to talk about my issues, but I know I need to. And so going into those things was honestly like such a huge factor into like me being in a better headspace today. And if somebody wants to get into therapy, someone wants to get medication, even if you never thought about it initially, but you feel like you're in a space where you just can't do it on your own, there's no reason for you to sit and think about what others have to say, because those people are not living in your reality. Those people don't know what you're dealing with. They don't know how you're dealing with things and how serious it might be. And I feel like a lot of Christians especially are so scared of like what others have to say. And it's like, well, those others, they're not living your life. You're living your life. And if you know you need help, then seek help. If you broke your arm, you're not going to sit here and be like, well, I'll wait for it to heal. I'll pray on it. Nah, you going to the hospital, bro.
Everything you said is so powerful and so true. Like, just the idea that a part of growing up is taking agency over your health, physical, mental, all of the above. And this is not to say, right, that there's no power in prayer. Like, that's not what we're saying. We totally believe that there is power in prayer. But we're saying that there's also other tools God has given us, like gave us at our disposal as well. And so like taking advantage of those too. Because yes, if you broke your arm, you could pray, but you also are going to go to the hospital. You're also going to get pain medication to deal with it. So I don't know why it's so hard for us to like see mental health in that same way. Maybe because it's less tangible. It's harder to understand, which makes sense. But it's still just as important, if not more important, because your mental health affects so many other aspects of your life, including your physical health. Yeah, you said so many good things. And one thing I thought of was, I think you mentioned like feeling like you were drowning at one point, right? And I literally just saw this image of like, if someone is drowning, they cannot save themselves. That is the idea of drowning. You can't save yourself because you're drowning, right? The only way is for someone to come out and get you and pull you out, right? Like I even almost drowned once actually as a kid.
Girl, same. What is going on here?
I know, it's like a random story, but I was like at the pool with my brothers and like I was drowning at one point and my older brother like saw me and I think he thought I was like playing around and then he like realized and like came over and helped me out, right? And so in the same way, like if a lifeguard is they can throw you their little lifeguard thing for you to hold on to, or they're gonna jump in there and get you and like swim you out. So in the same way, like if you're struggling in this sense where you cannot help yourself, you need other people to help you. You need other resources to help you out of that situation. So everything you said was so spot on.
To add on to that too, I feel like obviously there's power in prayer. There's always been power in prayer. But I also feel like there are things that God allows you to go through for a reason. And like God doesn't take away things immediately. And like yes, that's something that I find myself struggling to like wrap my head around. I feel like a lot of Christians also too, because you tell people like, pray and like God's going to deliver us. But at the same time, Jesus did say that we're going to go through trials and tribulations, but take heart, I've overcome the world. So it's like he never guaranteed that everything that we go through, he's going to take away. Everything that we're going to ever face in life, he's going to make better. But he said that I'm here with you in those seasons, in those situations. That's what we're supposed to hold on to. And I feel like people with mental health, especially, they think that it's not something that equates to the same as like someone who was a drunkard and they asked the Lord to free them from drunkenness and boom, they're free now. They like mental health. Nah, like I think that's just like, as you said, it's not tangible. You can't really hold it or see it. It's more of just like abstract. So because it's abstract and people fear what they don't understand. So they're obviously going to just like, oh, something's wrong with you. It's not our problem. That's like a you problem. You need to go talk to God about it. But it's like, it's like if you're going through something and there's a season of life that you're struggling in and seem to continuously struggle in and God hasn't taken away, those are things that people struggle to reconcile with the Lord all the time in every different types of areas of life that Christians have dealt with. And I felt like mental health is also a part of that. Like, there are things that God's not going to is not taking things away for a reason. He's allowing us to go through it, allowing us to kind of go through that suffering. But we know that suffering produces patience. Suffering produces all these different godly attributes within us. But he's also doesn't want us to sit in our suffering and like, just like not just wallow, but like be in pain and like not get help. Like obviously if you're suffering, he wants you to reach out to him. He wants you to have community. He wants you to talk to other people. There's a reason why. And so I feel like with mental health, like it's such a huge thing that like, yes, mental health, you can pray and God can take mental health away. That's a possibility. And it's very much a real thing. A lot of people have had that happen. But if it stays with you, if it's something that you're still dealing with and God hasn't just snapped his fingers and it's gone, use the resources that God has also allowed us to have to navigate through it, to be a blessing later on to others about mental health. And I feel like that's something that people forget to put with mental health, that it's a part of that.
Yeah, that is such a great point. Just the idea of like long suffering, just like with any other issue we can face in our lives that seems like persistent, that seems like it's not getting better or it's not changing in the way that we want it to, like that can be really difficult. Just like you're saying, like about mental health being like a persistent issue somebody can have. And so realizing that, okay, like I can't just sit here. I can't just sit in this and like expect something to change, which kind of leads me to the question of, especially when it's something that becomes like clinical, like how do you balance your responsibility to take care of your mental health with the fact that sometimes if you're dealing with a mental condition like this, it's not entirely in your control to really take care of it the way that you should.
Yeah, it's always a balance in life. It's just about pretty much everything. And I think this balance kind of is, one side is like, okay, to take care of yourself, go to therapy if you can, take medication if that's something that you need to have. And if not, be consistent in talking to people, in journaling, learning and researching ways to better control, intrusive thoughts. And then with anxiety being, because depression and anxiety are best friends, they go hand in hand. And so finding ways to cope with just like those moments of having anxiety attacks and being able to ground yourself with breathing techniques, being able to just have those at the ready, just like kind of like equip them anytime you need to, is good. But at the same time, not to say like those things are in vain, because those things are helping you immensely learn to not just work with depression, but like fight against it. So it won't be something that controls you, but you control it. But at the same time, depression is consistent. Depression will try to hit you back with more. And there are just going to be moments where you just feel like you can't. There's going to be moments where you feel like after all this, I just don't know anymore. Like, is it even worth it? And that's okay. And I feel like there's just recognizing that you are trying. And even if you aren't trying as hard as you used to be, or even if you have kind of given up trying, don't give up entirely. And having grace for yourself is such a huge thing. And I'm still learning to do that even to this day. Having grace for yourself and being kind to yourself, even when you're at your lowest moments and feeling like you'll never win or you'll never succeed at just fighting these thoughts or these feelings. Being okay with like, hey, today is rough, but you know what? It's okay. We're going to try again tomorrow. Or let's just do what we can today and just go to sleep and wake up and see what tomorrow holds. Just having a time reflection for yourself, just to like say that it's okay, and having grace and not beating yourself up for the lack of putting in work for yourself or the feeling that it's not working out, And that's something I definitely am still learning to this day, of just trying to be gracious to myself, because there are a lot of moments where I'm just kind of like, man, I'm feeling horrible. I haven't been keeping up my journaling, or I feel like everything I'm doing is like for naught. Like, what's the point of all of this? And I have to like remind myself, it's okay. Like, this is a battle. This is a climb. Like, just like if we're climbing up a mountain, it's going to be tumultuous. But like the more you're climbing up, the more you're going towards the summit. Like you're going to reach the top sooner or later. You're going to get to a better space, and you are getting to a better space. Even if it feels like you're going back 2 steps, you're still going forward. You're learning so much more about yourself, so much more in the present circumstances that you're going through. And it's just like that balance is more so of like doing what you can, do what you're able to, but also knowing that like, even if it feels like nothing is showing for itself and like nothing is really working out well, don't beat yourself up for it at the same time.
Yeah, that is so good. Giving yourself grace, like you're going through a really difficult thing. And like all that matters is that you show up every day. Whether that means you showed up by like going to therapy and like exercising and doing all the things that are good for you, or you showed up by like getting out of bed and eating something, whatever it looks like in that day. But just like you saying, like trying your best to just keep going. And I think this is also where the importance of community and friendships and relationships shows up, because it's like on those days when it's hard for you, or in those seasons where it's like really hard for you to take care of yourself as you should, that's when you have those people that are like, hey, have you done this? Or hey, how are you doing? How can I like support you? How can I remind you of things, of ways that you can be taking care of yourself if you don't have the motivation to do it yourself? Or just like having those systems built of like, okay, I already have a schedule with my therapist where I see them every other week. So whether or not I like want to, I know that it's scheduled, so I'm going to do it, versus like, I never even set that up in the first place. So it's so much more difficult to even start. Yeah. So I guess in that vein, what advice would you give to someone who has a friend that is struggling with their mental health right now?
Yeah, I feel like mental health obviously is very subjective per person. Like each person deals with it differently. Definitely the symptoms kind of are the same for everybody, but they also show up in different ways because every personality is different. And I would say, depending on like the level of friendship you may have with whoever has and is dealing with depression, I feel like baseline, the best thing to start off with is to ask how they're doing. I don't think people realize, but like a lot of depressed people don't even check in with themselves. I find myself never really checking in. And like with journaling, it's a great way to check in because you're like writing about like how you're feeling. But if you're not journaling, if you're not doing anything, you're just kind of going with emotions and you're just kind of trying to manage your depression on your own and struggling. asking how you're doing makes such a huge difference. It literally not only shows that you're caring about the person, you want to check in and see how they're doing, but it also allows, I found myself in this boat whenever people have checked in with me, it allows me to check in with myself. And if someone's like, hey, how have you been? How are you doing? And it's just like, how am I? How have I been doing? And it's like, I haven't thought about this. I just been feeling really down. And thank you for asking me this. Like, I didn't even know I was feeling this way because I really wasn't thinking about it. I was just trying to like numb. And I think that's one of the easiest and just like simplest ways to start, just checking in. And if you want to like establish a routine of checking in, I think that's great. Figuring out what works with your friend, figuring out what works with that person of just like, hey, can I check in with you every other day? If it's every single day, that's great. If it's every week, that's amazing. Like whatever works with your friend. But checking in is such a huge thing because if you don't check in, they're not checking in with themselves. And you never know what state people are in, what they're going through, what they're thinking about. And especially when it regards to suicide, like those are thoughts that do cross people's minds. I've had a lot of suicidal thoughts, especially last year. And so it's something that like you want to make sure you check in because you don't know what they're thinking about, what's going on in their mind, what they're battling with.
Yeah.
And then from that, depending on the level of friendship, I feel like being able to sit and listen first before you offer advice is a huge thing. And just like hearing what they have to say and hearing what they are dealing with and what they don't understand as well is important so that you can kind of just let them be able to speak. Because sometimes you want to give advice and that's a great friend thing to do. But sometimes it's best to first listen before you give advice. Because sometimes, like for me, I know for a fact, whenever I was giving advice, I was just like, cool. I don't care. Like, and it's like, because it's like, as much as I hear your advice, I myself in my mind is like, I can't do that because I don't have the capabilities. I don't have at all any like, I'm not smart. I'm not good. I'm not anything. I don't think I'm worthy of anything. And to give me advice and just trying to help me to like, oh, you got it. Just do this, do that, do that. I don't want to. I could barely get out of bed right now. I woke up this morning and I hated it already the morning. Like, so advice is not what I need right now, you know? And like, there are moments where advice is very much warranted. Like, you know, especially if the person's just like drowning. And if I'm sitting here, like, I don't know what to do. I honestly feel like I want to end it all. Okay. Hey, you know, why don't you just come over? It could be as simple as, hey, why don't we spend some time today with each other? When are you free? What are you doing? You know, let's hang out. I don't think you should be alone today. Let's do something. Are you hungry? Have you eaten today? You know?
Yeah.
Get up, take a shower, brush your teeth. Can you do that for me? Like doing those little things, meet them where they're at is the next thing. Like hearing them and meeting them where they're at. Don't give them a million other tasks. You know, that will seem like you're telling them to go fly to the moon. Like, it feels that way because I really woke up struggling to even move my fingers to reach for my phone on the side of my bed. And you're telling me I should go and take a walk. What? I don't want to take a walk. I don't want to go outside right now. And it's like, it's not funny, but it's like, it's just like, oh shoot, that's okay. I didn't think about that. And it's like, those are things that it's just like, every person's different again. So it's like, hear what they have to say and just meet that person where they're at. And then if you're able to, you know, recommend, hey, have you ever thought of going to therapy? Hey, have you thought of taking medications? And see what they say about those things. Don't push them towards it because at the end of the day, a depressed person can't be forced to do something. They have to make those decisions themselves. And that's just for anything. Like you can't force somebody to do something. If they're not ready, they're not ready. All you can do is support them and guide them and kind of say, hey, I think you should try this. I think you should do this. You know, I really strongly believe this will help you out. I don't want you to be here anymore. I care about you. but like you can't twist their arm and say, you better go to therapy or I'm not gonna be your friend anymore. That's crazy, because if you say that, then they're just going to feel more lonely. And that's just a disaster, a recipe of disaster. And we don't want that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like just checking in with somebody can be the first step. And then just listening, meeting them where they're at, and then, you know, shedding a little bit of light on advice of things they can try doing. And hopefully in due time, they're able to kind of come to their own self and be like, you know, I do want to get help. I really do. Like, I'm struggling. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't know what to do. You know, maybe it also takes like when they at that space, then you're like, okay, let's look up therapists together. Let's look up, you know, like psychologists around our area that you can go to, you know, like, let me help you there. Like maybe they can't even, they're scared of going on the computer and looking up places because they just feel like if I look up somewhere, like I feel judged already. I'm judging myself just looking these things up. And so it's just, there's so many little avenues, but starting small and just kind of keeping it simple and just being there for them is the most important thing. Because like, there's a lot of people who have their own thought process of what, you know, this person should do and how they should move and what they need to, how they need to help themselves. Like, that's a very understandable. You're seeing that person from the outside perspective, and you're seeing that person and you care about that person. So you're like, they need to do this, they need to do that. Like, that's the only way they can get out of this. And that's so understandable. Yeah. But if you try to put your perspective and like shove that on them, and you're not really seeing where they're at, there's just going to be this conflict because you're not trying to meet them where they're at and you're trying to help them. But like, are you really helping them by not sitting them and letting them tell you what they can or cannot do?
Yeah, that is such great advice. And it's so simple too, like the things that you're saying, like it's not anything elaborate or dramatic. And like, as someone who, like, I am definitely that friend. I think there's like different types of friends. I'm definitely that friend that if you're like telling me you're like struggling with something, I just want to help you, right? I don't want to see you struggling. So I'm like, well, what can we do? And like, let me think. And like, I want to suggest this and this and that. But it's just like getting past that desire to feel like what you say can like fix the issue, because the reality is that this is a complex issue. This is something that is going to take time and like a lot of intentionality. Yeah. And so it's like just accepting that, okay, like I can say everything I want to say, but that doesn't mean any of that is going to do anything necessarily. And that is okay. But like you were saying, just being mindful of where the person's at, first of all, before you even start, you know, giving your laundry list of ideas, because like it all comes from a good place, right? It comes from the place of, oh, this is someone that I care about and that I want them to be okay. I want them to be in a good space. But it's communicating that in a different way than maybe the way that comes most naturally to you, which is like something that I'm still learning and that is just learned in general.
Yeah. It's definitely a hard thing too. I do remember like whenever I was going through it, and a huge thing with it comes to depression. I feel like this kind of goes into another topic. It kind of goes back to like a little bit of the what you can control and then what you can't control kind of thing. Depression makes you act a certain way. Like you may be more angrier and rude to your loved ones. And that's just a part of the amount of different symptoms that depression just manifests in. And I think a huge thing when it comes to also helping out a friend on both sides, it's like having grace for that friend that might be giving you a hard time, that might be talking to you in a way that's just like, you're not like this. And then to the person who deals with depression, it's like, yes, there are things that you might be, that your emotions are more exacerbated because of depression. But I think it's also important to take responsibility for your actions, because if you are not willing to do that, then you're not willing to mend all the issues that you're dealing with. If you can't start off with taking responsibility for your actions. And I had a lot of talks with everybody, honestly, truly, because it was like a learning experience for everyone, not just me, but like for them as well in my circle. And they're just seeing me deal with this and not know how to help me. And depression, it can cause a lot of rifts between friends when you don't realize it. You think that if someone's depressed, you can coddle them. And it's like, no, that's not always the case. Sometimes it just makes you like, it causes a rift instead, and you just have a separation. And you don't want to deal with that person who's depressed. You don't want to deal with that friend that's like always having mental issues and stuff like that. But I think there's a level of grace that needs to be given from the friend's perspective, and a level of accountability that needs to be taken from the person who's dealing with mental issues for healing to even really truly keep blossoming in your life. Because your mental health doesn't only affect you, it affects the people around you, surprisingly. And that's something that without those conversations, I didn't know that. I wouldn't have realized that, because depression makes you're in your own world, you're boxed. You're in your head, you're thinking about only your issues, your problems, your faults, all about you. And you don't realize that like that also is affecting your family, your friends, your people that knows you the closest, because they know who you are. They see you in a state that's not at all who you are normally. And so I think like if we want to enter a space of healing, we want to enter a space of growth, we want to enter a space where we can really begin to like fight against depression, we have to have grace for ourselves and grace for our friends and accountability on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is definitely an area that I don't see discussed as much, honestly, just like this idea of the balance between like grace and accountability. And yeah, you're right. Mental health affects everyone around you. But if you're dealing with it, you know, it's already so much to deal with on your own that it's hard to see past yourself and like see how that's impacting the people that you love. And so just the fact that you were able to have all these honest conversations with people in your life also makes a huge difference. Just giving them visibility too, because if you're not struggling with it in the same way yourself, it can just be hard to understand. And so I wanted to talk about your video series that you created on your experience with depression, because I thought it was just so necessary and so like unique to you, and just you using your skills and your talents as a filmmaker in putting this together. So yeah, tell me like about the process of creating that, what led you to make it.
Yeah. It's so strange because like I don't know how I had that thought process, because I came up with the idea in the middle of my depression of last year. And I just remember around this time, amongst all other things, one of the biggest things that was also like keeping me super depressed is the fact that I felt like I was super behind in just doing film stuff and just having some sort of experience and being able like just to like be in the industry of some sort. Like I just felt so behind.
Like working in the
working in the industry.
What you studied in school.
And so I was like really wrestling with that throughout this whole entire depressive episode. And I think I forgot who it was. It might have actually been Demi Lola. Just kind of like having different conversations with her and like different people, hearing people say like, you know, like you never know what could come up from this. Just like this could also be a great like story to tell, you know, later on and stuff like that. I think that thought was kind of implanted in my head. And so I just had a moment where I was just lying in bed and lost in my head, lost in my thoughts. And I was just like, like what if I recorded myself and just like showed depression in like this very real way, and like maybe try to like explain what depression is truly like, especially like me being a Christian and dealing with depression. And so like I was kind of just like, I just don't know how I'm going to do that. Like I don't know. I could barely even look at my camera, let alone pick it up and start recording. It was actually in April of last year I recorded everything. And after recording that, it sat in my external hard drive for months. I like had it and I looked at it. And one thing too, like I was starting to like feel my old self coming out, like, oh, I could do this. I could make that. Like, what if I make this scene? Like, what if I edit like this? And like, I'm feeling these emotions of like, oh, wow, like these creative, like excitement. And immediately you'll get killed by just like, girl, it's not going to be good. It's not going to even look great. This is going to be trash. And so I wrestled with just even the thought of opening up my editing software. That was my biggest battle. I fought, cried, just prayed about just like the struggle of like opening up my editing software and editing that video, because I felt like it wasn't going to be good. I felt like this was going to be a waste of time. And the Lord was just like, you won't know until you try. Like if you don't try, you won't know. And it took until the beginning of this year in January, I just decided, I was like, you know what? I miss God. I haven't really been talking to him enough. I really just been like numbing myself to everything. And I was just like, you know what? Let me just fast. Let me fast and spend time with God, because I can't do anything in the end of the day. And those 2 days of doing it, it was like such a nice reset. And it was like supernaturally, God gave me the motivation to get back into doing this project. And like, I just kept feeling like I'm hearing the Lord say, just finish, just finish, just finish, just go. And even if I had like, but I don't know, just finish. Yeah. What if just finish? And it was just like, okay, we're doing it, Lord, we're doing it. And man, the Lord knew what he was doing, because each segment I edited made me like fall back in love with editing, fall back in love with my creative side, fall back in love with just film in general and telling stories, and like sitting in the editing room and just like, okay, let's try this idea. Oh my gosh, what if I add this? Oh my gosh, it looks so good. Like, and I miss those feelings because I hadn't done it for a whole year. And it was just like a healing in its own right. And it only came about because I spent time with the Lord and I fasted and I let him supernaturally just like push me towards it. And so now I'm sitting here like, dang, I finished. I did it. I finished it. Praise God, because I have a problem with starting things and not finishing. And so I feel like this is such a huge feat in my story. And so I'm just kind of like, God, that was all you, bro. Like, that was only you. Yeah. And so being able to create that story, it did take a minute of figuring out the nuances of what I wanted to do. It started off with me thinking like I was just going to have a voiceover talking about like depression or something like that. But then knowing myself, when I like to talk serious things, I like to do poetic stuff. But I was just like, you have a lot of real, raw journals that you've written throughout 2023. Why don't we take bits of pieces of that? And like, that is the base that molds each story. And so that's why I decided, I was like, finally, like, it took a while to get there. I had like the poetic pieces, journals that I had, and then I had the film that I filmed, and I was able to marry the two together. And I'm very proud of myself. I'm very happy. And I just feel blessed that the Lord really pushed me to do it. And that's how you know, like, I just want to say, like, that's how you know God cares about the little things. And that's how you know, like, if you have gifts and talents that God gave you and you're bringing it to him and you want to use it for his glory, he will help you. Like, he will legit help you. He's not sitting here like, don't talk about it. Your mental health. Don't you dare edit and film. Like, he was like, finish strong, please. Yeah. I want you to do this. And it's so beautiful to have your heavenly Father is literally encouraging you to like do the work, like do it, like go for it, like be creative and share something so personal and deep that can reach others, you know? I want to be able to be a voice, because I feel like a lot of Instagram and social media is just like, I'm going to show you what I want you to see. And there's like here and there a few people sharing about like struggles they've gone through. Most likely it's struggles that they already went through and they're just like, this is something that happened, you know, thank God I'm out of it. But I was just like, you know what? Like, I want to talk about something that is already taboo in itself, But then on top of that, me being Christian, I feel like that's just going to be so powerful for someone who doesn't know the Lord, and they get to see someone who does, but they also deal with depression. What is that like? Is that something that I feel like people don't really think about, or feel like other people who are Christians are dealing with these kind of things, you know? And so I wanted to kind of like bridge that gap, and also just be able to speak to other Christians who might be trying to hide their mental health and act like they're fine, and they're not really, you know?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm so proud of you for doing it. It's excellent.
Thank you.
It's so unique to you, and the way that you put it together. Like, in some ways it's abstract, but it's still like telling the story of your reality and what you were going through and what you've been through and what you're still overcoming. Yeah. And just like, I want to commend you, because I feel like it's definitely like just radical vulnerability, especially on a platform like Instagram. I think you even said it in the caption of the first one, is just like, this platform is used to like conceal the truth in a lot of ways, or just kind of like give off this illusion of what our lives look like. Because yeah, it is social media, and so in some ways like you're not going to get everything, but it's not like in these videos you're like, you know, filming yourself crying or something like that. But you're just like telling this like really honest story in a way that I think will really resonate with people, whether they have gone through it or they like just need to understand it more to help other people in their life. And I feel like one way that God is just so good to us is that he's able to use and like help us use like really difficult situations and experiences to create something beautiful. Because like even this podcast, like I started it after going through something really hard that caused me to really struggle with my mental health. It birthed this thing, which now I look back and it's like, wow, it's so beautiful. And I can't believe like this is what came out of that. And so like even seeing like you put together this whole thing that like now you can look back on it. It can be a resource to other people. And so, yeah, it's just like so amazing. And you finished it. Like you did it.
I did. And yeah, just speaking on to what you just said, just God using very hard situations. It is beautiful that the Lord, with situations, he turns them and uses it for his glory, and he uses it for the betterment of not just yourself, but like for other people too.
Yeah. I feel like you're just giving people permission to be like, maybe honest with themselves, especially Christians, like if they're struggling with this, and that it's okay if you are like, it's really not, you're not abnormal. You're not like a bad Christian. Like it's just a part of life in this like broken world that we live in. So that's also awesome. Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to share on this topic that you haven't got a chance to?
Oh, I guess I do want to say, obviously, as someone who's dealing with mental health, you know, you want to cultivate a safe place for you to like talk to people that you know. I think it's important to like be careful on like who you're telling your issues to. Because I feel like in general, like if your life in general is hard, like there's so many other struggles that people have, and it's, you know, the people that you want to tell your issues to, and you know the people you don't want to talk to about your issues. And so I feel like in the same vein, when it comes to your mental health, you want to be careful on who you open up to. Because I feel like there's some people that are able to hear you and allow you to share what's going on with you. But there are people in your life that won't be able to handle it. They don't know how to handle it. And they might handle it in a very negative space. And I feel like it's okay to protect your mental health further by not sharing with those people. And sometimes it's your family. Sometimes it's, sadly, like, especially in our culture, you know, like us being Nigerians, they don't really understand that. And maybe they know about it. They hear about it on the news. They know about it through other means. But it's like one of those things where it's like, if they're not ready to hear that and handle it with care, then it's okay for you not to share those kind of things. It's okay for you to be careful on how much you share, or maybe not share anything, and keep the people that you know you're able to talk to about it closer in that regard. Obviously, you're not trying to like hurt anybody, or you're not like pushing them away or anything like that. But it's like for your mental health to get better, to get to a space where you're able to heal and grow and be able to fight and like get that ability to fight, it's a part of it. You have to be able to let in those who you know can handle it and not bring in those who can't, because not everybody can handle it, and that's okay. And it's not like a knock to them, because you know, even in my experience, the people that I let in, not everybody knew what to do with it, because it's still something that's new. It's still something that's hard to understand because it is so personal. It's so nuanced. But like knowing that they're willing to learn and they're willing to hear you and they're willing to understand where you're coming from, that's enough to know like, okay, I can bring these people in to my space and where I'm at. But if someone's not in that space yet, that's okay. You know, you don't have to bring in everyone you know into your issues. And that's just the same kind of advice anyone would tell you. Like sometimes like it's okay to like not share with the family or not share with that one friend where you thought that they're close to you, but they truly don't know you as well or know how to really treat you the way you need to be treated in this moment. And that's okay. You know, I feel like being able to recognize that is even a great thing in itself. And so being able to start like taking those steps to be like, all right, who can I trust? Who can I bring in? You know, like start small, start with someone that you know, like maybe you have a brother or a sister or a cousin or someone that you can bring in, you know, or if it's just your therapist for now, you know, like that's fine. Start small and slowly bring in people that you know that can be with you in your mental space and help you in it, you know. I think that's an important thing, that it's not something that you realize until you go through it and you're like, oh, okay, there are people that I should let in and there are people that I shouldn't, because I know they just can't handle it in a way that will help me.
Yeah, I think that is such wise advice, especially because it's like you want to be mindful of your well-being. And, you know, unfortunately, sometimes, like, because, like you said, mental health is just a hard thing for some people to understand. You sharing with them and in their effort to, you know, help you and be loving to you, that can actually cause more harm than good. And, you know, specifically, I think with family, because those people you don't really choose in your life and they are kind of there permanently. It's like, maybe I can't share as much with them right now, but hopefully in the future, they're in a place and like a space and they have an understanding where I can share more with them. But if it's not like that right now, then that is like also okay. You're not keeping it to yourself. You're still sharing with people and like people that you trust and people that can give you like wise advice. Yeah, I think that makes total sense. So, yeah, do you have any encouragement that you want to share with someone who's struggling with their mental health right now?
First and foremost, please seek God. I don't know what else to tell you. I feel like there is just, as I said, there's a supernatural thing. The Bible is very clear that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but principalities, powers, you know. The kingdom of darkness is doing all they can to really destroy the human race and draw people away from the Lord. And mental health is such a war. You know, the devil's really battling in our minds because he wants our souls. And I feel like there's so many things that I learned because of the Lord through my mental health. And there's so many things that I overcame because of the Lord. And like, yeah, I still deal with depression. Yeah, he hasn't taken it away, but he's been present. I'm dealing with a supernatural force that's beating me down. So I need a supernatural force to lift me out of it. You know? Yeah. And so I feel like first and foremost, like having God in your life, having the Lord be somebody that you can fall into when you just can't anymore is so powerful. Even when you don't feel him there, and there's so many moments where it feels like God's not there. You're just like, where are you actually? Like, why aren't you fighting for me? But like knowing that it's not always a feeling, it's just knowing. And that's so hard a lot of times, but knowing that you have a father who is fighting for you and always there is such a help in finding a way to fight depression. You're already like 10 steps up in your journey. And so I feel like that's first and foremost, just having that. Because, I mean, the suicidal thoughts, that's real. And that's only something that the Lord himself defeated for me when I had those moments of just voices telling me to end myself. That couldn't have been stopped unless the Holy Spirit was present. So I think that's so important because there are just things that humans can't do. There's some things that we're limited. The only thing that can really restrain some things is through the Holy Spirit. So I think that's important.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I would say, like, please talk to someone about it. That's just it's so simple. But when you're depressed, you isolate. You unknowingly and knowingly isolate. But at the same time, you don't want to isolate because you're like, I need connection. I want to be with friends. I want to be with people. But at the same time, you feel like you don't deserve those people, that you're worthless and they're better off without you. And it's such a weird dichotomy. And if you don't tell anyone about it, you will continuously spiral. You'll continuously isolate and like not taking care of yourself. And if no one knows, they're not going to really check on you. They're going to think you're busy with life because everyone's busy. Everyone's doing things, trying to get their life together. And if you don't say anything, no one's not going to really know that you need help. And I think that's like the hugest step for someone who is dealing with mental health, to talk to someone about it, whether it be a mentor or someone from church or a close friend, a cousin, a family member. Your therapist, if you just want to just go straight to therapy first and talk to someone in therapy first, or your psychologist, being able to talk about it is so important. And like, there's something about speaking about your issues is so freeing. There's a reason why the Lord says, confess your sins to one another, because he knows that when you confess, there's chains being broken. There are things being freed. Like when you start talking and telling people about it, you're able to finally kind of step out into the light. There's power in talking about it. Even whenever you really don't want to talk about it, or you don't even understand, or you don't know what to say, being able to just express your conflicted feelings even is so powerful in itself. And I think that's such a huge thing that every person dealing with any kind of mental health illness, from depression, anxiety, so on, it's so important. Talk about it. Don't keep it to yourself, because that will only cause you more harm. That will only cause you to spiral, and it can cause so much detrimental things that we don't want to happen. We don't want to lose anybody in this life, because you are fearfully and wonderfully made. The Lord wants you here. We all want you here. And so saying something, just anything, so that you can tell someone I just need help. I'm not okay and I need help. I think that's so important. But yeah, I think that's my two main advice: talking about it and, bringing God in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is such good advice. I agree completely. And like, I think even for someone who may not be a Christian, like who may not know God, it can be just as difficult for someone who does know God to bring God into it. Like you were saying, like you feel like, God, I don't feel you in this. Like, how are you helping me? And like, that's when I would always say faith is so much more than feelings, because our feelings change. Our feelings can be fickle. Just like you said, like when you are depressed, you feel a certain way, but that is not the way that you want to continue feeling, right? And so it's like, well, what is here for me to hold on to? And that is the word of God. And so that's when I really turned to scripture and like reading my Bible and reading what God says about like who he is to me, how he is always with me and he'll never leave me, how he is close to people that are brokenhearted and crushed in spirit. And like reading these things over yourself, even when you don't feel it, because like you said, he's fighting for us in ways we don't even realize. You don't even know how much he's helping you right now and all the things that he's protecting you from, because you're not aware of it because you're not experiencing it, but he's always working on our behalf. So yeah, I think it's so important to seek God through this, because it is a really serious issue and has, like you said, serious consequences. And then just, not keeping it to yourself. There's freedom in confession for sure. Yeah. Just letting other people know what you're going through and giving them visibility. So thank you so much for sharing that. So how have things changed for you now that you no longer have this us versus them mindset about mental health? You know, it's like a real thing that you struggle with.
I think now that I understand that I deal with depression, I'm able to like, okay, I'm feeling this way. Why? Is it depression? Is it just circumstances? Is it this? Is it that? I'm able to easily identify or go through a list of identifications of what could be reasons why I'm dealing with such and such, or I'm feeling such and such way. And then, if it is depression, now that I've kind of gone through some therapy and been given some kind of tools here and there, and even had medication for a time being, knowing that, okay, I've learned this, I've understood this, how can I apply this here? How can I really think through things? And that's something I definitely didn't do before. I've always been quick to just kind of shut myself down and not even deal with my emotions. And that's something I'm so much better, thank God, but I'm working on it heavily because I still am learning how to not go straight to numbing, but go into all right, let's evaluate. All these different thoughts that would just kind of hit me here and there, I'm able to better process. And I think that's such a huge thing. For me, being able to process my emotions is so good. I very much just took for granted the power of processing. Processing is so important. That's why journaling is so heavily stressed to everybody, not just if you have mental issues in depression or anxiety, but anybody. Journaling is a great way because you need to learn to process things that you dealt with, especially if you go through very, very difficult situations of losing a loved one or going through the breakup, a job loss. Those are important moments in life. Those are very hard-hitting parts of life. And if you're not processing these things, you could just carry this wounds and then start wounding other people because hurt people hurt people. And even while I'm processing with God. I'm literally God, I'm feeling this way. I don't know what's going on. I think it might be this. It may be that. And these are things I never used to do before too. So that's even a feat in of its own as well. And before, I had dirt thrown on me and I was just I'm here. I don't know what to do. Yeah. Now someone gave me a shovel and I'm able to start digging and be all right, what's going on? Let's uncover the issues that's just underlining underneath here. And I think that's been such a blessing because I just never had that before. I never really did that. And that's what caused more wallowing. That's what caused more spiraling because I never dealt with anything. I never really talked about anything. I just sat in it. I just let it fester. And it's if you're not taking care of a wound, it's going to get infected. And if it gets infected, then that's more problems in the future. And so, I think that's been such a huge thing that I've been just kind of embarking on and trying to do better in and grow in my depression now. At the same time, if I literally just can't, I'm just here, God, I don't know anymore. I'm just going to give this to you. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you're saying just about now you have tools. Now you have resources versus before, there was just this wound, but you didn't have anything to use to treat it with. You're just staring at it. It's not getting any better. But now you're able to interrogate your thoughts. And it just reminds me of that verse that's take every thought captive and submit it to God. And you're I'm having these thoughts, whether I think this way because, a chemical imbalance in me, or whether I think this way because of a difficult situation that I'm going through. Regardless of what it is, I'm able to take these thoughts captive and submit them to God and allow Him to help me in this. So that is just so good. And I mean, it's just amazing to see you even here and talking about, everything that you've been through. And like you said, it's something you still struggle with, but you're getting better every day. You're learning new things. You're moving towards the summit.
Yeah.
I am so incredibly grateful for this conversation, and I really hope it meets you where you're at. Whether you found yourself struggling with mental health for the first time, for a long time, or you just want to better support a friend, I am rooting for you. Mental health is so important, regardless of where you're at, and we can all benefit from giving ourselves and others more grace. I have links to mental health resources and everything referenced during our conversation in the description box, so I hope you find it helpful. As always, I'd love to know your thoughts on our conversation. You can reach me on Instagram at the Making Space Podcast, where you can also follow for more content. Before you go, please rate or review the podcast wherever you listen and share this episode with someone who would benefit from hearing our conversation. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode of Making Space. Bye!